Okay, this is a video for the Dunu SA3. It actually says studio on the box, so I'm going to treat it like what is supposed to be maybe a studio monitor. It comes with 3 sets of tips, like black with a blue sleeve, whites, and then all blues. And it comes with a nice case and a fairly decent cable. It's coming in at about 140 if I recall correctly. 140, 3BA, 3D printed shell, hand-painted faceplate. It's not, they look nice. I'm surprised a little bit by the price. The bigger surprise, I'm a big fanboy of the Sony EX800 ST, which ST is supposed to represent studio tuned, which is a younger brother of the EX1000, and that is not a set that you would listen to for hours and hours because it has got those treble elevations, but it's got fantastic detail because of that treble elevation, but that precludes it from being something that would be claimed to be used in a studio. So Sony released the EX800, which is about the same in the bass and in the mids, not a lot of coloration, and a toned down treble that you could, I don't find it to be a very colored set. It's got a big fan base. I've got it myself completely customized like 2 or 3 times, and I finally settled on the cable. I like it a lot. I consider that to be something to be benchmarked against, to be something that you would use in a studio with maybe a little boost in the treble, maybe a little, but otherwise it would be something that would be non-fatiguing. You could listen to for hours because I've done it myself. I could get that. This set, labeling itself to go after the same audience, doesn't seem to quite reach that. Using tracks that I use in the bass, the mids, and the treble, I'm not going to break that down in this video because I would be not praising on every step of the way. Let me give you a little preview. This is a graph of the set. It is Tancio Mirai is something that has a 3BA that comes to mind. This has a very different tonality to that, and it's relative to the treble, whereas the Tancio Mirais tend to have like a hill, something like the Fearless S6 Dewey or the S8F, but a different version of that, kind of the Harman. This is gone with like a EX1000, different position peaks, which means it's going to give you a sense of detail, but it's also going to fatigue you. This is the direction that they went, and the bass lacks weight. Listening to something like Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing, which I just talked about in my last video, like what was that piece of gear that they came up with that, and that was the 808, which is still famous to this day. Listening to that same track on this set, the notes in the low end lack weight and authority. There is a certain sense of inauthenticity that comes with this. If they lifted up the bass a little bit, what I consider to be a compensation boost for the fact that it is a BA and it's not a dynamic driver, maybe that could have been worked out, but they actually didn't do that. So there's a 4-string bass guitar on the Violent Femmes, also sounds thin, I guess is the best way to explain it. There are people that use sets that are reference, and then they take that and they plug it into tube amps, because the tube amps give them distortion that it's slightly fuzzy, but it creates an overall warmer replay of what is an otherwise very accurate and very enjoyable set for audiophiles. So they use tubes, they roll tubes. That's their, relax with some brandy and just tune out to the same music they might listen to without tubes, and they want to listen longer, so they use tubes because it kind of tones the whole thing down. With IEMs, you can do the same thing to a point. I think the Mojo, when it came out, a lot of people noted that stuff like the EX1000, others that might otherwise sound kind of analytical, cold, neutral, would be warmed up by the playback of the Mojo. It's not introducing a bunch of distortion, it's just the way that I love the Mojo, by the way. People ask me, is that still relevant? Good gear is always relevant. There's your answer to that. This set wouldn't fall into that because I think everything needs bass. Bass is the backbone to everything that I listen to in my library. Whether it's something like Jimi Hendrix, The Grateful Dead, West Coast rap from the 90s, East Coast rap from the 90s, Led Zeppelin, everything that I listen to requires there to be sufficient low frequency. That's got to be there. When I do checks about kick drums and bass guitars, I expect that to be a check, and then I proceed because I literally start with bass and then work my way. Doing that with this set, it became apparent right away that this would be a fatiguing listen in the treble with just about everything, and wasn't going to give me that weight in the note in the low end with a kick drum by Led Zeppelin on this album right here. That is not playing back the way I expect it to, which would be high fidelity, which would be part of the audiophile definition, which would be defined partly as faithful reproduction. If it's a kick drum and it's notable in history and in reviews of the time when the album was released as being authoritative and John Bonham, coming through the speakers right at you, that's the way it's supposed to be played because that's the definition of an audiophile. Lots of sets don't do that, and this set certainly does not do that. Listening to John Paul Jones' Led Zeppelin II 4-string bass, where he's also well known to be prominent at the intro of the track, it's also lacking weight. So then you think, okay, well, they're studio tuned. They're not supposed to be emphasizing bass. Okay, that's fine. The treble is notable in its emphasis of certain things going on. Vocals replay differently. I won't say bad because I've said that the treble is that's a rainbow of joy that is the discovery. There's not a lot of ways to do bass. There's not a lot of ways to do mids. Really, really, literally. Mids there's a slightly forward, slightly back, flat. Everything else is too much scoop, nobody wants that. Too much forward, nobody wants that. So there's literally 3 parts of the mids, or 3 mid adjustments that are possible. A little bit forward, flat, a little bit back. Most people aren't going to accept anything else. The bass can be flat. It can be slightly emphasized in the sub bass. It can be slightly emphasized in the mid bass and then a little bit more in the sub bass. So it's got that kind of glide that's coming in. And then the treble is lots of different stuff. This lots of different stuff is not to my taste. Cymbals sound like I would expect them. Part of them sounds enhanced and another part of them sounds like they're dying. Not dying, but the second part, the harmonic extension, sounds like it's notably reduced in a way that is beyond what ESTs have been doing recently, the EJ07. Cymbals sound fine on that. Graph doesn't. This is an amplitude scale. Doesn't really reflect that on the EJ07, but all of my OCD cues come back on that. And that there's no reason to hype that set. That's like a year old and people have moved on and they've got a new set. But that set is exceptional. This set, listening to the same stuff, the Cymbal Strike on Blind Faith, Can't Find My Way Home, 27 seconds, is a different experience and it's not necessarily good. So this is not doing studio as I would expect it, which is just accurate and don't color anything. It's not doing bass in the way that I would like it to do. So it's not a fun set, and it's not a set that I would use to critically analyze music. Like, I've got 4 versions of Dark Side of the Moon, and they all sound slightly different. One of them's radically different, and it's got some different versions of songs. Like On the Run, I've got one that the ending is completely different from the other. I can discern that stuff clearly with good sets. That wouldn't be what I would do with this. So would I wreck this? No. And this also allows me to kind of stick in that I'm developing clear preferences. The more I get, the more I listen to, which is in the hundreds now as far as IMs go. I clearly am a fan of dynamic drivers in the bass. I am clearly a fan of slightly elevated bass so that it replays my favorite songs in the way that I grew up listening to them on floor speakers and monitors, where the physical lower frequency driver is separate and it's doing that well. Maybe it's vibrating the table, vibrating the floor, vibrating my car, like it would my solar plexus if I was at a concert, whether it was an orchestra or whatever I went to. You can feel the low frequency travel through your body. It's a very nice experience, and anybody that's ever been to a full orchestra, forget about my library, been to a full orchestra, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Right through the solar plexus, you can feel it. That's an awesome experience. I gravitate towards sets that give me a similar kind of experience, even though it's in my head. It's not out of my head. All of the stuff is in its psychoacoustic illusions to create any kind of senses of space. This is not really stepping right in any kind of form. So I'm turning out to be bashing it, but I didn't plan on doing that. So it's not good in the bass. The mids, I'm not paying attention to because the treble is grabbing my attention. So if it were good, and it's not necessarily bad, It's got a 10 dB gain. That's like right on the line of what I consider to be acceptable. It immediately falls off and followed by a second one. It's visually unappealing and audibly unappealing. And Tupac Ambitions as a Rider was a no-go. Dire Straits, Sultans of Swing, the guitar solo on that, harmonics of vocals and guitars, the fundamental crossover is very close to the same, so a lot of time guitars and vocals are kind of fighting, especially when they're elevated or de-emphasized. They're grabbing attention from you at the same time and getting in each other's way because of where they exist on the scale. This isn't doing it for me in any kind of a way. It's hard for me to say this is made for, this is not made for people. If you're monitoring yourself, I guess it would depend on the instrument, but it certainly wouldn't be a bassist, a drummer, or even a guitarist. Vocalist not either, so I really don't know who that would be for. For a general music listener that just wants to relax and enjoy, I wouldn't say this is the target either. So I'm left without a group to say, it's not my thing, but it's your thing. I don't know whose thing this is. And this is what happens when you review stuff that you used to say, I'm not going to make people feel sad because somebody might love this. I don't know who that would be. I don't know what they listen to. It wouldn't be my library. It wouldn't be something slanted towards Massive Attack. It wouldn't. I don't even think people that listen to like Vocaloid. But I don't know about that because I don't listen to that. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Dunu SA3. It's a 3BA. It's about $140. It's in a price range where there's a lot of other stuff that's probably better. I'm sorry, definitely better. And if you have any suggestions for like where this might be targeted towards, you can suggest it because I'm not hating on it. I just can't figure out a home for it. So that's the SA3. It's 3 BAs, 140 bones. That's a tough sell. This market is getting tighter. So I'll stop rambling and go ahead and let you guys go. And I'm out.